Okay, Robbie, so I have to ask, one of the most important subject matters amongst banjo players is the banjos, right?
Banjo nerddom is fixing to start.
Yeah, banjo nerdum, here we come.
Yes.
So tell us about, this particular banjo you're playing, and just in general, what kind of sound you like, your setup, the gear you use, etc. But let's just start with the banjo. So what is it?
Well, the banjo itself is a 1932 Gibson RB3. It's an original flathead. It is an original 5-string, and this is the original neck. I just recently acquired this banjo. I've only had it about 2.5 months, something like that. It's a lifelong, a musical lifelong dream, and really almost lifelong for me. I was 12 years old the first time a fella handed me a pre-war flathead. A fellow named Bill Anderson, is still a friend of mine today, lives in Little Rock. I was playing at the time a new RB800, which was a great banjo for what it was. But Bill handed me this, he had a flathead Granada. And he handed it to me, and I immediately knew that there was something way, way different about Bill's instrument versus mine. And I say all that to say that started at 12 years old a desire in me to have a pre-war Gibson banjo, and most specifically a pre-war Gibson flathead banjo. And over the years, I've had some really good banjos. I mean, I've been very, very lucky, very blessed to have good banjos. And for the last 17 years, I played a banjo similar to this one, in that it was a 1929 one-piece flange style 3. Came from the factory originally with a 40-hole archtop ring, but I found and bought an orphan flathead ring, verified ring, and had Frank Neat build a neck for it. It was a great banjo, and it's been my main banjo for the last 17 years.
Now that one originally was a 4-string?
It was originally a tenor. Yeah. I had the short scale tenor neck on it.
Right.
But I had Frank.
And that's what makes this one kind of the holy grail. It has the one-piece flange and the original 5-string neck.
And the flathead tone ring.
Right, and the flathead tone ring.
This one, as far as Gibson banjos, I mean, yeah, you could. The only thing I guess that would be maybe more of a holy grail than an instrument like this would be an original Granada.
Right.
Flathead 5-string,
which is basically there was their gold-plated kind of deluxe model.
It was, and there's debate, among the banjo nerds, which one is the holy grail, because you have the camp who likes the Granada sound, you have the camp that likes the 3 mahogany sound, and they're two totally different animals. I mean, they really are, but this one. Like I say, I just recently acquired it. Always wanted, even when I had the Style 3 with the verified orphan ring in it and the Frank Neat neck, which is a great banjo, I still wanted that bona fide, no questions asked, no issues, flathead. Because anytime you have a banjo with an orphan ring, you can have it looked at by whoever you want to have it looked at, and you know what it is. There's still that certain part of you that goes, really?
Yeah.
Even though you know.
Even if it's correct, it's not the way it was.
Well, with me,
it's not the exact same. And what you mean by orphan ring is that it's an original ring of the era. It just wasn't the one in that particular banjo.
That's exactly what I mean. A lot of people will raise an eyebrow when you say I have an orphan ring. Well, how did they get separated?
Right.
Well, that's very easy, and people, I don't know why people can't understand this, but there are many ways that these old banjos get taken apart. The fact that this one is 83 years old and is still intact is amazing. But natural disasters, okay, in our part of the country, there's tornadoes.
Yeah.
I mean, I guarantee you, whirligigs have tore up some
Right.
instruments around here. There's floods that ruin the wood. There's car wrecks
Yeah.
that destroy the wooden parts of them. There's house fires.
Right.
That's the natural way
Right.
that these banjos, you end up with parts. Something happens to the rest of it. But this, the fifth reason, banjo people have always been tinkerers.
Right.
They're always wanting to try the latest, greatest, this, that, or the other. Just because someone had an original flathead in the 50s or 60s
Right.
or 70s,
Yeah.
not knowing what they had, does not mean that they didn't take that apart and experiment and have some other ring in it.
Right.
And let the original get away. There are many ways these banjos can get taken apart, and you end up with these pieces. But a lot of people are very skeptical when you say, "I have an orphan ring." Well, I don't know about that. Well, trust
Well,
me.
yeah, you and I both know. I know many musicians, professional and amateur, that have experienced exactly the things you're talking about: the floods, and the natural disasters, the wrecks, the fires.
Okay.
I couldn't count on I couldn't count on both hands all of them. I know documented, even professional musician cases.
Recently, the Katrina flood. Okay.
You had the Nashville flood here back in 2011
Well,
too.
that's
yeah.
true, but I mean, think about what a music town, New Orleans
Sure. Yeah.
is. Think about the instruments down there that were covered up in water.
Yeah.
Okay. Some of them might have been salvaged. Some of them may just be
Yeah.
available for parts.
Parted out.
You
right.
know, I mean, we're getting kind of off the subject, but this has always been a bone of contention with me about how things get separated.
Sure.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
You know, it's very simple. I mean, yeah, what you want to find in an old instrument is one that's just come out from under great grandpa or grandpa's bed or
Yeah.
out of grandma's closet.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that you want to find.
Yeah, they bought it in the 30s, slid it under the bed, and it's been there ever since.
But
yeah.
those instruments are getting harder and harder and harder to find.
Right. Well, like you said, even back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, these instruments weren't as rare then as they are now, and they weren't as valuable. And people, I don't know, I guess it's speculation on my part because I wasn't there, but from people I've talked to and stuff, it wasn't all that uncommon, even if you had something like this back in the 50s to experiment with different things,
Well, I don't know how many different tone ring manufacturers there were, if there were any different tone ring manufacturers, but I know banjo guys, and I can
Right.
say this because I am a banjo guy. They all tinker. They all switch this, that, and the other around. I mean, there's a banjo that is a collaboration of two different banjos taken apart to build. They had two banjos, took them apart, took parts out of this one and put in this one, and vice versa, and they still ended up with two banjos, but they had two original 5-string flathead banjos
Yeah.
that they swapped parts around
Right.
on.
Ended up being orphaned out.
This can be documented. This is not hearsay. This was a project done by Earl Scruggs and a man named Joe Drumright.
Yeah.
Okay? Stuff gets changed. Banjo nerds have always been banjo nerds.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll get off that soapbox. But you were asking about this one. This one, as I said earlier, I've had it about 2.5 months. It is a 40-year dream. Because, as I was saying earlier, I would have been perfectly content finding an original TB or PB 4-string
Sure.
with a flathead pot.
Yeah.
Being able to come up with an original 5-string, that's above and beyond a dream, because these are so scarce.
Right.
Joe Spann says that between late 29, when they started doing the one-piece flange, I think it was October of 29, and 36, I don't know what month in 36, when they dropped the Style 3 insignia and picked up the 75, that I believe it's 53 Style 3 5-strings. Now that encompasses original archtop 5-strings also, so I don't know what the ratio is between the archtops and the flatheads. But just take into consideration that there are only 53 Style 3 5-strings built between 29 and 36. That
Right.
tells you the enormity of what this is.
Right.
Uh, okay.
Now, what's the serial number on this one?
Well, this one carries a very special serial number, special to me anyway. We've already determined, and I think put an exclamation point on the fact that that J.D. Crowe is my banjo hero. J.D. over the years has played 3 different banjos. Banger, which I believe was 9467-5, I believe. That's the famous no-hole 3 flathead. Back in the early 80s, he acquired an original 5-string flathead 75, that's 752-4. Acquired that from a friend of mine in Little Rock, Bobby Rogers. And sometime in the late 60s, JD acquired a 20-hole 3, that is serial number 116-3. This banjo is 116-4.
It's the litter mate.
It's absolutely a brother
Right.
to JD's 20-hole.
Does JD still have the 20 hole?
He does. He does. JD, of course, a lot of folks probably know JD recently, I'd say within the last year, sold Banger, 9467-5, I believe it is. But he still has the 20-hole, and he still has the 75 flathead that he bought from Bobby Rogers.
Yeah, that's cool.
So there are several things about this banjo that are very special. This banjo, I can't even tell you what it means. If I talked about it very long, I could get all rabbit-eyed and get real emotional about this banjo.
Sure.
I can't explain what it is to own it. The direct connection with my hero.
Mm-hmm.
To my knowledge, I can't find proof. I've heard tale, and I've checked out some of them, that there might have been a 4th owner of this banjo. I cannot find that 4th owner, or another owner. I guess that's how I should say this. To my knowledge, I'm the 3rd owner of this.
Right.
I've got a ledger from the man who bought the banjo brand new. Then to the man that owned it second, and then to me. I can't find any other owners. Like I say, even though I've been told tales, I can't get confirmation on that. It's just
Yeah.
I don't know, Jake. It's just a real special banjo. It's a dream come true for me. I'm blessed beyond belief to own it.
Well, and all sentimental things aside, too, it just sounds incredible.
Well, it's not a bad old banjo. I mean, all of
That's
that
an
aside,
understatement, yeah.
it's not a bad old banjo.
Something about, and every instrument's going to sound different. Every pre-war, Gibson style 3 original flathead 5-string 1-piece flange is going to sound different.
Well, yeah, they all do. I mean,
Right. But there's a certain quality in the tone. Even as different as they sound, they're all connected. And it's the hardest thing to put into words. I'm not even going to try. But I think you know what I mean. There's just a certain sound that you can't get anywhere else.
No, and that's been the subject of much debate too.
Yeah.
I mean, there are those who hear it. There are those who don't. There are those who say that it's all hype.
Well, and to address that, to my ear, what little bit I know, but all of them I've ever heard definitely have an ancient tone to them. It's hard to put your finger on what it is, but I know it when I hear it. And a new instrument can be just as responsive, just as loud, maybe even on stage through a microphone sound just as good or better, easier to EQ maybe, I don't know. But all those things aside, I think there's that X factor magical quality that you just can't argue that new banjos have compared to, this holy grail type of instrument.
Well,
That's just one guy's opinion. Like
No,
you
no,
said,
I
the
understand.
opinions are as varied as there are people who have them.
They are, and you know what they say about opinions.
Yeah, right.
No, it's you know, whether you think it's hype or whether you think it's real or not, really, to me, really doesn't matter. This is my banjo. This is what I've wanted for 40 years. I own it. I hear it if nobody else does.
Yeah.
I hear in this banjo what I want to hear.
Right.
I hear in this banjo something that I never, ever, ever dreamed that Robby Boone would own.
Yeah.
It truly, in a way, it's a shame that it ended up where it did. I mean, no, I believe it ended up where it was supposed to go. I mean, and there's more to that story that I won't get into, but I believe, for whatever reason, this banjo's where it's supposed to be. I can't tell you why. But there are folks out there that are much more deserving in the arena that an instrument like this needs to be heard. I play on a very local level. I mean, just, 4-state area here in the Midwest. I don't record anything that is going to be heard nationally. So in some ways, this banjo has been silenced from a lot of folks that really ought to hear it. And I'm talking about it in the third person because it is. This is not just a banjo.
Mm-hmm.
This is a holy crap is what this is. I mean, it's an original 5-string flathead.
Skip the grail and go straight
Oh
to
yeah,
crap.
you go right over holy grail to holy crap. That's I feel that someone who plays nationally, who plays all over the place, who records stuff that you're going to hear on Sirius or whatever, should have got this. I don't know why they didn't. I don't know why this came to me, but I couldn't be more grateful. I couldn't be happier with it. I wish that it had come along 25 years ago when playing was a little easier.
Yeah.
Playing came a little easier. But maybe it came along at a point in my life where I was mature enough to keep it.
Yeah.
Because I know a 25-year-old me would have found, some old car that he wanted and probably sold the banjo to buy the old car.
Yeah.
So everything happens for a reason.
Sure.
I don't know. That's a whole lot about this banjo, but it's a whole lot of banjo. I don't.
Let's talk a little bit about your setup before we put the final nail in this episode here.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on banjo setup in general? I know that you and I have talked about this before, and there are a lot of factors. From the relief in the neck. Basically, you want the coordinator rods to be neutral.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people get in a habit of especially that outermost coordinator rod, be the rod that's closest to your belly.
Mm-hmm.
That can change the pitch of the neck
Mm-hmm.
for playability reasons, but in doing so, you put an undue stress on the tone ring. Looks like you got your tailpiece, kind of floated up and parallel. You don't have it cranked down.
I do. There's probably between an 1/8 and 3/16 between the bottom of the tailpiece and the top of the hoop on this one.
Mm-hmm. And you just run it straight parallel to the head.
Well, I like just enough tension on the bridge, or on the tailpiece toward the bridge to hold the bridge in place.
Right.
That's the tone I prefer. I'm not saying that this is the correct place to have it. I'm talking about for the tone that I like, to let the banjo open up, to let the banjo be resonant. For me, all I need is enough tension on the bridge to hold the bridge in place.
Sure.
Supplied by the tailpiece.
Yep.
Heads, just the good old Remo Weather King,
Mm-hmm.
top frosted head.
Where do you do tap tuning method, or do
Well,
you like
I try.
Right.
You know,
You
some
aim for
days
like a
I can.
G sharp?
I do. Some days I can hear that note. Some days I can't. But yeah, that's what I shoot toward is tuning the head to a G sharp.
And for those who can't hear that, there's a mechanical, there's basically a reflection gauge or
It
something.
is
Yeah.
a drum dial.
Right. It's called a drum dial, and you can set that at different points on the head, and it'll give you a reading of what the tension is in pounds, I guess, in that particular place.
Yeah, I just numbers.
Yeah, numbers.
I don't know if it's
I always call
inch
it
pounds or
a
foot
lot of
pounds
times you'll find a banjo sounds best between depending on what you're going for Robby's type of sound, between 89 and 90 pounds seems to be a
Yeah.
good place for most of them.
Right, and that is determined sometime by the instrument itself. Usually 89 to 91 on a drum dial
Sure.
will get you in the ballpark. And depending on whether you're setting up a mahogany instrument, or if you're setting up a walnut or a curly maple, sometimes that varies a little bit, because if your banjo is naturally deep, naturally darker tones, which a lot of mahogany instruments are. I guess G sharp is G sharp, but it seems like a little bit tighter head
Right.
is a little bit more friendly on a dark instrument.
Right. It give
You
you a little
know.
more responsiveness out
Right.
of the instrument.
Right.
It does. The notes won't get as muddy.
Right, and that, to me, that's what I'm shooting for. I want a good balance of bottom end. I want a good balance of high end, which creates, in my mind, that big, full, thick, mid-range sound.
Right.
I don't like a head that's too tight, because all you got's highs. It's
Yeah.
real chingy-pingy.
Right.
I don't want the head to be too loose, because everything's really muddy.
Right.
You don't get good note separation. To me, for a banjo to sound fat, it has to have that good combination of highs and lows, which generally a lot of people think that depth is loosening the head. You can get a fatter sound by running a tighter head,
Yeah.
to a degree.
Sure.
You don't want to go past that G sharp generally with most instruments.
Yeah. Now, would you say? I know that this is a loaded question, and if you're anything like me, you can appreciate the different tonal qualities of all the combinations. But
Oh, I do.
yeah, would you? This particular banjo is mahogany with the rosewood fingerboard, and the fingerboard plays a lot into how an instrument sounds too. The neck and fingerboard. I'm sorry, the neck and fingerboard wood probably more so than the resonator. As far as that goes.
Yeah, I believe that's true, because the lining in a lot of these old resonators is the same wood.
Right.
With just a
Veneer.
a different veneer.
Do you have a preference? I know from what little that I know about them, my preference tends to be this kind of setup right here. I like a mahogany banjo that's set up well.
It's my ultimate favorite.
Right. But there are certain,
Well-
naturally, certain sounds you can get with one you can't get from another.
See, you're
Neither
talking-
one has it all, I guess.
You're talking to a card-carrying member of the Banjo Nerd Club.
Yeah.
I love the sound of walnut banjo. I love the sound of a maple banjo. Both straight grain and curly, because there's different tonal characteristics. That's why there's 6 stupid banjos laying at my house of different configurations. I like them all.
Sure.
And no one banjo, I don't believe, will ever create all of those tones. But my favorite tone, the tone that I gravitate toward more than any, is this nickel mahogany combination.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even the plating changes the sound to some degree.
Well, people say it does. There are people who says no, it can't, because it's a microscopic film on the top of the base metal, that it has no sound characteristic changes whatsoever. I don't know.
Sure.
In my mind. And
Maybe it's just the kind of banjos that would have had gold typically had different woods in the first
Well,
place.
it may be. Here's
Yeah.
the thing. In my mind, it makes a difference.
Sure.
And once again, in a situation like this, the individual is the only one that has to hear it.
Right.
So in my mind, yeah, plating makes a difference. whether it's nickel, chrome, or gold.
Sure.
That may not be
That's one thing,
truth.
you know, if you want to argue the nickel and gold, but the chrome for sure being the harder plating, I definitely hear that in the sound most of the time. But then you say most of the time it's on a walnut banjo too, you know, traditionally speaking.
And a lot of gold-plated banjos are maple banjos.
Sure,
You know,
yeah.
so yes, I mean there may in lie the whole thing.
Yeah,
But I don't know. I'm convinced, and as long as I've convinced me,
yeah, that's all that matters.
that's all that matters. You know.
What about your bridge, spacing wise? Standard, crow,
This bridge
height?
is a 5/8 Frank Neat bridge, just standard ebony over maple. It does have crow spacing. I played crow spacing for years, and I'm just used to that.
Sure.
But nothing special. Just a maple over ebony 5/8 crow spaced Frank Neat bridge.
Yep. I see capo wise, you like the spikes.
I do. I prefer the spikes. For me, they're faster. I much prefer the aesthetics of spikes.
As opposed to a rail or something like that.
You know,
Yeah.
right, right. Well, I mean, and that is absolutely, totally and completely a personal preference
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
If
Well, that's what
people
we're talking about, your preference. I
right?
guess.
You know, if people like the rail type, you know, that's fine.
Power to you.
But for me, I like the spikes. I don't hook over much, but you know, a rail in my way would keep me from going. You know.
Yeah, you're noting the fifth string with
Yeah.
your thumb.
I mean, it can be done, but this is just faster, cleaner, more aesthetically pleasing to me.
Sure, yeah. And at the end of the day, you can pull those out, fill the holes, and you can't even tell they were ever there.
That's
a
true.
lot harder to do if you got a rail up here. You know.
That's true. I mean, once you drill 2 or 3, depending on what type rail capo you use, holes in the side of the neck, which in most installations I've seen that will get both the neck and part
And
of the binding. You know, if it's just in the wood, you can hide that somewhat.
Yeah.
If it's in the binding, there's no way of hiding that, you know,
Without
without
replacing
replacing
it.
that piece of binding.
And what's your standard capo up here?
This also, this capo is getting old. This capo is probably 16, 17 years old, and it's based off of the old Tom McKinney design, you know. But this one was built and sold through Frank Neat. Frank had a guy who did these for him, and the fella has since passed away. He's been gone for quite a while, but this is an older Frank Neat capo,
Okay.
built on the Tom McKinney basic design.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to another point that I notice about your playing a lot. Both your spikes and the type of capo you use indicate you don't capo up past the 4th fret
I do
very
not.
often, if at all.
I try real hard not to.
And I notice you don't have a shove hidden in your flange anywhere there either.
No.
So you prefer, if you get up into that range, rather than playing in C out of a G formation, you just like to play in C.
Generally,
Yeah.
yes. And in the band that I mentioned earlier, we play nothing in C.
Yeah.
So there's no need for me to go there. I mean, I don't know why we don't play anything in C. We just don't play
Yeah.
anything in C. But yeah, given the choice, I would figure out something
Out of an open C.
out of a
Tune your D string down to a C note
well,
possibly.
yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with C.
Sure. Well, there gets a point too. Not necessarily at C. That's just a half step up from B. But if you start getting on up here, you're starting to lose some of the tone,
Well,
the
see,
fullness.
I really think I personally really think you do in C.
C, sure.
You know, when I was a kid, I used to love to play in B.
Yeah.
You know, really anymore, I'm not such a big B fan. I like G and B flat.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know, but I think a banjo has optimum tone in G, and I mean that's you're hearing the banjo.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of banjos have optimum tone in B flat. I don't know why, if it's something sonically or what it is, but banjos in G and B flat. Like I say, I'm getting to where I don't much like B like I used to. It's getting, it sounds just a little bit too piercing or something.
Yeah.
And,
Pingy.
well, yeah, and C, I don't know.
Even
C,
more so.
Well,
yeah.
it would drive me up a wall. But that's just me. You know, I mean, if you play for Doyle, you got to play in C.
Yeah.
He does a lot of stuff in C, you know, and there's been a lot of great stuff. I mean, a lot of his stuff in C recorded is great stuff. It's just one of my idiosyncrasies.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's just like I said, an observation based on the gear we see here.
Right.
So,
Yeah. No C.
Yeah. No C.
No C.
No bueno.
Yeah. No bueno.
All right. Well, I think unless you had any closing statements or anything like that, I think as far as what I wanted to ask you and document, I pretty well got all my questions answered. So, did you have any final thoughts or anything like that?
I didn't have any thoughts anyway through this.
In the first place.
No, I was relying.
Autopilot.
I was relying on you to come up with the questions and hoping with everything in me that I had a semi-intelligent sounding answer.
Well,
So-
we certainly appreciate you taking the time to enlighten us, at least to what your one man's opinions are on this kind of stuff. So, with that in mind, what do you say we take it out with one in C, since that's subject matter here?
Okay, we can do that. But before we head out, I mean, I do want to say in closing, I appreciate all the folks that call in to the store and tell me how much they enjoy the videos that Jake and I do, and the nice comments that you folks leave on YouTube. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, likewise.
That's about it, folks. All I can do is say thank you, and we hope you enjoy this, and hope we haven't bored you to tears.
Yeah. Yeah, there's 6 banjo nerds out there that have really enjoyed watching this.
There's going to be 6 guys that are just elated. You know?
All right, folks. Thanks a bunch.